Well, welcome to the Harm Reduction Report. This is Willard T-Belly, sitting with...
YourPalKal.
And Mad Max.
Mad Max.
Welcome to the show.
Today.
And Vic.
And Victoria.
Hello.
We are in my parents' basement, sitting around the table. On the couch I was once a baby on.
Mm-hmm.
It's a picture of me as a baby on this very couch.
This couch has some history, huh?
Yes. To this day, I will lay on the top of the back of the couch, especially when it's leaned up against this pole here. It's a good spot. We can try it later.
Quite a plank.
Yes.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful time doing our Christmas special. The best part is I listened to it a couple times again, and the first thing that happens in the recording is I say something like Christmas special, and I think it's Cal. I can't tell. You just say Christmas special.
Yeah.
I think it's Cal. And I think it's really funny. People probably think we're silly.
You need a little jingle machine sometime that makes sounds, you know?
Oh, and the very end of the clip is the best too, because you all burst into song. You remember that?
Yeah. Oh, did you include that, huh?
Oh, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah. So now, our conversation chilling tonight can be something called our New Year's special, just because it's, what is it, Friday night now. This is going to air Tuesday morning. That is January 2nd, isn't it?
Yes.
Yes. So, like our Christmas special, we're going to be a little late to the game, but we're going to do it anyway. So, what I enjoyed about the other time was the storytelling and all that. We thought we would try to tell some stories again about previous New Year's that we've had, in which there might be a harm reduction lesson to be learned, or other winter break stories, but also to think about the future and to think about what we are dreaming about for harm reduction and stuff, resolutions we want to make going into it, maybe predictions we might have. I think we'll learn something along the lines of, it's very interesting how things have changed. A year ago on Christmas or New Year's, I don't think we would have been sharing the stories we've already been sharing on the radio, let alone telling anybody about this stuff. So I'm just really noticing that's a big change, and I feel the same, I feel good. I'm glad we're doing that. Just last episode, I had to cut some down. So what goes on the radio is 56-minute clip, and what goes online, we're going to have the longer conversation online, right, going forward. Last week, when I was editing our conversation, we were a little bit over, so I had to cut something out for the radio version. And this, I know I gotta leave that in. This, no, I like that. And I almost cut out the story where I mentioned, I talk about the first time I did LSD.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized, if I take that part out, I'm doing more than just trimming it down, I'm taking out an important piece. And this is in the same clip where one friend tells a story about how he first had a conversation about marijuana with his parents, and in which another friend is talking about he's on meth some Christmas and he has no one to talk to about it. And here I am going to take out the part where I'm a little embarrassed about the fact that I admit to having once done LSD, for the sake of our harm reduction story. And wow, I left it in,
Yeah, I'm glad you left that in there. That's kind of what we're here to do, is discuss these very taboo things and, admit this stuff and open up a conversation. And that's a segue to do it. That's how you do it. That's how it's done. Mentioning these things, mentioning the statistics that, LSD is 40% of the time LSD, or whatever the actual percentage is. Even after mentioning that to people, it still often goes over their head. They don't consider it.
Wait, newbie
still
question.
in the end.
What's the difference between LSD and acid?
They're the same thing.
Oh.
Yep. Acid is like the slang term for LSD.
It's not lysergic acid.
Yeah, lysergic acid, diethylamide. It's a hallucinogen.
Cut that out.
That's okay.
No,
There's probably tons of viewers who
For
have
the
that same
record,
question.
Victoria is about to color, is that a gingerbread man or it's a snowman
And a teddy bear.
and a teddy bear
Looks like a snowman gingerbread
in
cookie.
the coloring book with this huge box of crayons I have here. And we can't wait to see it when it's done.
No, I won't finish any of them.
Yeah, halfway through the next
Yeah,
one.
exactly.
I'll swing through and finish them up.
Yeah. So, does anybody, have any New Year's stories?
I have like a holiday story, I guess.
Okay.
I went to a Christmas gathering, and there was a person at this gathering that had suffered from a brain disease, and it caused their arms and whole body to kind of tremble, shake, tremors, almost similar to like a Parkinson's, but it's not Parkinson's. And so me and my brother were tasked from our parents, which ironically enough, with finding an edible, and it just so happens my roommate had one, and so we brought it to Christmas with us, and so this and we gave her the edible, and it was surprising because 10 minutes or about an hour later we were opening gifts, and she just turned to everyone and was like, "Hey guys, look," and the tremors went from literally like this to literally like this. It was pretty much gone.
Sounds very medicinal.
Even the speech
In this
was
case.
like better, like less
Wow.
interrupted. It was crazy. It was like 9 day, and I don't know. I've seen videos and heard stories of people in like Colorado or whatever and other places who like look at this magic they call it sometimes, how it helps, and then like seeing it for the first time and like in person, it kind of was like, wow, it's
Do you know
cool.
how she is today?
Huh?
How is she today?
She's good.
Is she? Is she still?
I mean, I don't know quite the details about it now.
Do you
but
think she enjoyed the experience?
Yeah, I believe she did. Definitely had some comments about, correct dosing and like better ways possibly to make it last longer or like that kind of thing. And it was like, I think in general, the group of people that were present during this, I think seeing this in person really changed a lot of people's minds on a topic
Wow.
some of them might have known, but a lot were very new to. And it was very interesting seeing their opinions in front of your face just change because they see it done in like such a positive way.
Wow. I've seen videos of kids on Facebook and like they have like an 8-year-old kid or something from North Dakota, and you watch his parents give him a mask with marijuana, with cannabis smoke or THC, I guess it's, and you watch the tremors stop or the seizures stop or whatever, and you think, wow, that looks really impressive. You actually saw this happen right in front of you, like a real live Christmas miracle.
Yeah. And like another thing was just like the vocal, the speech was very slow and kind of shaky because of it, I believe. And it even improved with the tremor stopping and everything. It improved that even.
Wow.
So it'd be interesting if, the medicinal marijuana was in a law in Grand Forks or city ordinance or whatever, that it's medicinal, legal, so something like that. I think she's actually from Minnesota, so I think it is legal there.
It's I think if you have a medical card in Minnesota, you can't get smokable marijuana.
But you can get like an oil or something like
Yes, and I know somebody I'm close with who is a medical patient, an old guy, and he says the it's bad there. Like he can't get what he needs. It's the laws are not quite there.
It's a start at least, I guess. But if it could progress to the point where like this person I know could get the medicine she needs like that every day.
That'd be probably a good thing.
And in the overall spirit of harm reduction, just seeing how like proper information versus, all the things you hear and claim to hear, but then seeing the actual event, so to speak. Seeing the actual effects of just like an edible. It really shows people and like, I don't know, makes them more open-minded and more willing to search for correct knowledge, I would say. That's the thing I think that was most stuck with me the most. Yeah.
You won't see something differently. what is it? You can't look at something differently unless you're looking at it. You know?
My roommate once said, "Nothing changes if nothing changes," and I didn't understand what that meant at first, but it's kind of like nothing changes unless you introduce a new stimulus, essentially. Unless something new comes into the picture, nothing changes.
So whenever a group of people get convinced of something and they're staring at it for so long, they're gonna lose sight of it. You know, the best thing for them would be to have another pair of eyes from a different angle look at this thing too, and tell them what they see. You know, more eyes on it, the better, and the more voices, the better.
Do you guys know that they just approved medical marijuana for autism?
For
Minnesota?
autism?
Autism and sleep apnea.
Huh.
In Minnesota, anyways.
And
I did not know that.
Hopefully we see a lot of that. I mean, people that need that as medication, should have access to it. If a medication works for them, they should have access to it. It should be researched. It should be easy to research and stuff.
Yeah, I'm thinking about this harm reduction, and I'm also thinking about freedom. You know, if harm reduction is getting in the way of your freedom, that would be kind of a bad thing, right?
Here's the same thing I would say though. It made me think is like nowadays people have trust in like pharmacies and doctors to give them the correct medicine, and I find that in the black market, so to speak, your buddies or your friends who are hooking you up with whatever kind of thing, you almost have a trust in them, almost similar, I would say, compared to you almost just assume until you've experienced a time when it wasn't quite what you thought. If you smoke something, it was kind of like didn't make you feel the same, and then lose some trust. Until then, you just have this like trust in the system, so to speak.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I've noticed that too. In my days of using, you sort of establish trust, this relationship with the dealer and the person buying the drugs, and I don't know, medicalization. Sometimes that trust is broken, especially within the realm of the black market. If you take that drug out of the black market and offer it as medicine through these reputable sources, such as doctors and pharmacies and stuff, you eliminate the need for that trust to be placed in a black market drug dealer.
Totally, because those people are not held accountable.
Right, yes.
Yeah, the dispensary in Colorado or somewhere that has a licensed business, they have nutrition facts on it, They tell you exactly the strain and exactly the potency and a recommended dose and warnings, like any medication from a doctor. And that requires not a dark market.
And I don't remember what country it was. It was in South America or in Europe. One of the cities had like this outrageous heroin problem. I don't remember what city it was. I wish I knew offhand. But anyway, the city opened up these clinics where addicts could go and they could have fresh needles and a doctor's or a nurse's like measured amount of heroin, and it was like given to them, and their like death rates from overdoses and overall like addiction rates started dropping, and after like 5 years or so, like it had been cut in half, like the death rates.
That's interesting that addiction rates drop in cases like that, because you're often face the argument that is essentially enabling drug addicts, and so it's crossed my mind often, like how come that decreases the rate of addiction? And
at the same time, at these places, most of them also at the same time offer like lots of services to get help.
Resources for treatment, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. And then I don't remember correctly, but I believe they actually like required you to attend like just one small little like 10 to 30 minute class before you start that using like their program, or so to speak, get signed up. And during that time they do a lot of that kind of stuff, and I think it helps people, because I don't think anyone's sitting on a couch just like shooting up a lot. Well, at the time they might be, but overall I don't think they're just going like, "Damn, man, this is great, I feel awesome all the time."
No,
like a lot of times it's just you're stuck.
Yeah.
I feel like
They want to get out. A lot of them want to get out. They're just stuck in this cycle. I wanted to get out. I wanted to get out from 6 months in. I wanted to get out, and I was in it for another 2.5 years. And what comes to mind right now is that I bet you part of the reason that these safe injection sites are very helpful at decreasing addiction is because it offers the drug addict a safe place to turn. Not only are they offering these treatment resources, but there's also this level of understanding. Like the doctors are saying, I understand you have an addiction. I understand what that is. And that's why we're here with this safe needle exchange. And so, you can feel safe sharing your ideas about yourself and your addiction with us.
Yeah, I think a therapist or somebody who works at a place like this would say that the most valuable thing in terms of is someone going to recover long term who's interacting with them would be that, yes, they're going to do their drugs in a place with a clean needle, and if they overdose, there's doctors there. But the best thing for them is that they're interacting with their psychologist or somebody there.
They're just getting pulled out of that black market environment.
Yeah, they're interacting.
It's like a positive arm reaching in, giving them what they want to kind of.
Yeah.
I don't like to call it lure them in, but it is kind of lure them in, and then they can just really
lure them to the light.
Yeah,
yeah,
the light side, so to speak. That's at least for some of these, harder, I would say more bodily damaging substances. For sure.
Highly addictive.
Overall negative, I would say. And then there's obviously other substances like a little ganj that it's on a different spectrum than that.
Yeah.
And that's also something that I don't know, there needs to be some kind of, where do you draw the line between which is good and which is bad almost? You know what I mean?
Yes. The word drugs is completely confusing because, as Alan Watts explained, we have this thing called a drugstore, which is perfectly normal, legal operation in which mothers and children go. But meanwhile, drugs also means these horrible things that will kill you and that you can overdose on, and you don't know really how to use them safely. And it just goes to show how confused we are when talking about things.
You know what else is funny about that too? But even in the sense, some of these, I would call it almost like a buzzword name drug, like fentanyl around at least Grand Forks. When you hear that word, it almost, it makes children cry and it makes mothers gasp and whatever.
Absolutely.
But a close friend of mine had to have surgery on his hand, and at the hospital, the only thing when he heard it, I think he had cut it really badly on glass along all the fingers and stuff. And when it was healing up in the hospital, he had a shooter that at a certain amount of time every whenever he needed it, after an amount of time or whatever, measured doses of fentanyl that the doctor would give him, and that was the only thing that helped his pain and could make it so he could sleep for at least a couple hours before. But obviously, it's so powerful that they have to strictly limit it. But in that sense, this thing that is so evil, so to speak, also is something that is really useful.
Yeah, it has an application.
Absolutely. All opioid medications do. Any substance at all does have a right way to use it. I mean, it might be not ingesting it at all for some of these things, but as we know by stories like that, not even fentanyl, which, as they say in every news article about it, is 500 times more potent than morphine, and all that's just 100 times less potent than car fentanyl. It's another thing. And talking about potency, comparing them like that, it goes well to prove the point that you can misdose yourself if you're getting this on the street, but it also confuses the point how a doctor in a hospital would we think it's crazy that you were getting fentanyl because that's killing people, but actually it's a normal thing you can get in a hospital to treat your pain when you need it.
In a hospital, they're held to a standard.
That button is going to give you exactly what it's going to give you, and if it doesn't, if it gives you something else, or it gives you way too much and it kills you, then that hospital is getting sued.
Yeah, they're in trouble. They have something
they're
to
held
lose.
accountable.
Yeah,
So
they want to do a great job because they have something to lose.
If your plug just gives you some rank, and all of a sudden your friend is just dead on a couch or something, there's no one you're going to go sue about that.
Exactly. No. And actually, if you bring your dying friend to the hospital in Minnesota, you could be arrested and charged with drug-induced homicide if he dies.
Whoa. Is that different in North Dakota?
Well, as far as I understand, there's not drug-induced homicide laws in North Dakota. There are in Minnesota. I don't know how many times it's been used or anything. I do know that the Drug Policy Alliance has made some really cool videos on YouTube about this, with stories of people in Ohio who, it's so weird. We talk about the medical amnesties thing and we're acting like that is true. And I think in many certain circumstances it is, and yet in many circumstances it's not. There's this woman they have a video about who's dating this guy, and they're both addicts, and they're doing heroin in their car. He begins to overdose. She brings him to the hospital. He ends up dying. They charge her with drug-induced homicide, and she's in prison for many years, and she loses custody of her children. Another person was sentenced for way longer, too, just for bringing their friend to the hospital. Any of these people could have just dumped their friend's body in the ditch or in the parking lot, which happened in Fargo last year. Somebody died in the parking lot of the hospital because their friend dropped them off. They didn't get inside. It's because this medical amnesty thing, we don't question it. I mean, we do question it when we hear stories like that. Can we call the hospital? Can we call an ambulance to pick us up? Are we going to go to jail for that? I don't think so in most cases, but there's many, many cases where it happens anyway.
I feel like that should just be, generally known. I don't think you should go to jail by any means.
Yeah, it should be.
But more so, it should value the person you brought in over. At least you brought them somewhere where they would live rather than just leave them. So
Yeah.
it should be almost like a benefit of the doubt. Okay, you're good. Like medical amnesty, what you're talking about.
Right.
Yeah, it should be made more obvious, like what exactly are the nuances of that law as well. And maybe we could do that. That'd be like an awesome endeavor for us to do, on this harm reduction hub.
Informational episode.
Yeah, about like medical amnesty and stuff, or have an attorney.
Yeah, we could
speak
talk to an attorney
on the show, or have an interview with him. That'd
That would
be
be
awesome.
super cool. Actually.
We should do that. Yeah,
It'd be cool if
so
they
you guys can look forward to that.
talk about that at the...
Put that on the action list.
Do,
Intermission. And now we're back from the intermission. Time to continue the episode.
Maybe Max is the talk show's band leader.
The sound effect master.
Yeah, you just sing us in and out and up and down and wherever we need to go.
Okay, we'll see how that goes. Yeah.
Okay.
Trial and error.
Yeah. I want to bring this up before my screensaver takes it off the screen again, and I have to get up and our dear homie Michael Dulitz, the Grand Forks Opiate Response Project Coordinator, who all the time is making me feel good about stuff we're doing, told me that somebody died this week. Somebody who went to high school in Grand Forks, I believe. She was known by some people that I know. She overdosed and died. And Michael told me that makes the fourth person in Grand Forks to die this year.
This year.
And the year's over now. And 4 people died is what he told me. And that doesn't account for the many, many, many overdoses that happen where people don't die.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them now are because people are getting Narcan and treatment and whatnot. And I think the numbers have gone down from last year, but I'll need to ask Michael. So 4 is actually, that's actually good news, as weird as that sounds. And it makes me feel weird to think about a year is going to go by fast. And we're going to be here again recording the New Year's special. And I wonder what that number will be.
Well, I would hope it would be 0.
That's the goal, right?
I think that should always be the goal.
Yeah.
Is it at least decreasing?
Yes, I think
years
so.
back?
And I think there was a Grand Forks Herald article recently, maybe we'll find it and share it, that explains that, fewer people have died this year than last year. And experts saying it's because we've been giving so much Narcan. I'll need to find that article and read it again, but I think that's what I remember it saying. So that sounds like evidence that the harm reduction of providing overdose antidote may be working here for now.
So as a New Year's resolution, we can strive for the number of 0.
Yeah, I mean, also with that, it's almost, think about it almost like venom, anti-venom for snakes. I feel like the current system, I guess if I take it correctly, almost is, that venom, it's not allowed. You can't have that venom, but you can't have this anti-venom either. But it should be like anti-venom should be available everywhere for snakes.
Yeah, sometimes the snake bites unexpectedly.
You never know when you're gonna need some anti-venom.
Aha. So a snake curled up in the bush that we're about to step on is like an addiction awaiting the next 14-year-old who gets her wisdom teeth taken out. It's like, it's those pills you're going to get, and the possibility of addiction.
But it's at the same time, like, you do need them, I would say, in that case, at the same. But there's just this pang of, I don't know. It's so dependent on the person. Some people take that stuff, like, I took my wisdom teeth medication I got. It just made me really tired and sleepy. And that's about it. And other people would take the same thing and just all of a sudden, like, fall into a battled addiction. It's just kind of crazy how much you have to also remember that people are so different.
Yeah, and throughout time, too, you're going to change.
Yes. Like, I remember being a kid and hating coffee, and now coffee is lifeblood. That's just one thing. It's like caffeine.
Yeah.
Like, caffeine is a drug as well.
Yeah, that brings up a point I wanted to mention. You were kind of getting at the confusion of the term drug and like what is a drug, and it brought to mind Frank White, who he brought up a wonderful definition of the pharmacological definition. Frank White being our faculty advisor of the Psychedelic Club and the Students for Sensible Drug Policy Club. In his class, Drugs and Society, he taught us this pharmacological definition of drugs, which was all-encompassing, and I really love this definition because it rings so true to me. Within this definition, a drug can be defined as beer, as nicotine, as caffeine, as marijuana, as heroin, as water, as food. And the reason water and food are included in the pharmacological definition of a drug is because it changes your physiology. You know, when you drink water, your physiology changes, your body changes, your neurochemicals and your hormones change. And so in this way, everything can be viewed as a drug. And I really love that definition because it sort of showed me that, you know, a drug is not inherently bad. Just because something is labeled as a drug doesn't make it bad. It, everything is a drug. And every drug has a specific application, both safe and dangerous. Water, the drug water. What's that?
You can take too much.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The drug water, under this definition, you can overdose on water, but that doesn't make water inherently bad. And I really like that. I really like that definition in his class.
It's so funny because this Alan Watts lecture about drugs I just listened to, he says the same thing. He said he was in the 60s, a conference of scientists or researchers or something where they were trying to come up with a psychological definition of addiction and drugs, and they couldn't because every time they thought they had something, it also included food and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't separate the two.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, food you can call a drug because if you're eating a lot of food and you feel good, the reason you feel good is because of that dopamine. You take a shot of heroin, the reason you feel good is because of that dopamine. It's not the heroin or the food that makes you feel good. It's that endogenous dopamine that's already in your body that is released that makes you feel good.
That reward system in the brain.
Yeah,
It's just
exactly.
like, good job, buddy. That was a delicious sandwich.
Yes.
It's the same system that's like, ooh, that was some nice heroin dopamine, man. That felt warm. Give me more.
Yeah.
It's just, everyone can get addicted to anything.
And video games even. Not even consuming something, but like a
big
visual stimulus triggers dopamine release.
You know,
it feels good.
The feeling of going to church or praying for any certain type of that all gives you the same.
Yeah,
works
feel
with the same
community, a feeling
system of feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
There are definitely healthy ways to release that dopamine.
Yep. Yeah.
There's unhealthy ways. And I feel like labeling a bunch of things as bad versus looking at each source and evaluating why it's bad, how it's bad, is a lot more helpful.
And do you think this is the problem? Do you think we never trusted our children with the full information? Because adults today, we understand a lot of these things now. The adults over there. But yet we don't. Why don't we tell our kids like sincere information about all these things in school and not, just don't do any of them because.
Well, I mean, holiday spirit, dude. Think about Santa. If you just tell your kid as soon as they learn about Christmas and everything, as soon as you tell them, you're just like, Santa's not real. You give them all the correct information right away, and all of a sudden, their development psychologically and everything, it's changed.
Yeah, it's
Because,
different.
there's definitely a difference between people that, we're told Santa's real versus they they weren't real for like if they were super early or not.
What is that difference?
Joe Rogan actually talks about this in it's a skit, so it's kind of funny, but it does bring up a point. But it was like, in some places, too early, and it's that weird kid that, like, thinks Santa's not real when everyone else is still thinking Santa is real. Versus, if you're too late, then everyone's like, oh, look at that kid, Santa isn't real.
Again, in this case, I think you could view it as being neither, like, good nor bad, A kid that believes in Santa for a long time maybe is fostering this, they're developing imagination. Whereas you give a kid the accurate information early on, then maybe perhaps they develop more critical thinking or whatever. They just develop a different skill set.
I would say a big flaw is too early. You're trying to almost overcompensate to try to dissuade that people from doing certain things that are labeled drugs, as we've been talking about. But they try to almost make a hyperbole of how bad they are. To kind of go they don't tell you what the actual effects or some of that kind of stuff is. So they try to inform you early, but I'd say the information is just almost, I don't know how to explain.
Well, there's
that.
no harm in finding out finally that Santa's not real. When people find out that what they thought they learned about drugs is wrong, that could kill them, and it does kill them all the time.
I think there is a tendency to sort of muffle or I don't know, censor what you tell kids about drugs. There is that tendency. And I think there was definitely that tendency in my household even as well. And that I can see how that can be destructive. I can see how that was even destructive in my case. I explored drugs for myself because I didn't know what the truth
Will,
was.
When you have children, how do you think that you'll explain drugs to them? What age and...
That's a good question, yeah.
That's a great question.
I was thinking about that as well.
I have no idea.
Honestly, probably.
I feel like I was taught about it way too early because I guess, I don't know.
What were you taught?
This is biased, but in elementary school, I remember the DARE program,
Mm-hmm.
DARE to be against drugs. And, you learned about going to parties and all this kind of stuff. And I think I was in 5th grade or 6th grade maybe. I think it was earlier than that, though, frankly. I remember thinking back to that, or at least at the time, I was like, I've never even seen any of this stuff ever. And by the time I first saw most of what I learned about then, I was in college, I would say, or maybe the end of high school. So the amount of, I don't know, if you get a preconceived notion that early about how super bad something is, and you think grow up with it, versus if closer to the age that maybe a majority of people are maybe exploring into this world. If it was closer to that age and more accurate, it might be more applicable. Not as many preconceived notions, so to speak.
I think the best thing to do is to be honest about it.
Yeah.
And that's I think what we are striving to do. That's what we should all strive to do, and that's what we want to bring people together to do, is to open up this discussion and find out more and have real life eroid, like we were talking about last episode. Real life exchange of the pros and cons of each drug. There are pros and cons. The pros are the reasons that people use the drugs in the first place. And if you omit those from your drug education discussion, then, again, you lose credibility.
Won't come across. Yeah, and if you lose that credibility, then you're wasting your time,
Yeah.
And you're setting people up for big mistakes. Because when they find out you were either dead wrong or you lied about the dangers of marijuana, then, as we've talked about before, you're more tempted to try something else and figure it's no big deal. Like the story I shared last time about using my painkillers I got from the dentist kind of flippantly, because, they probably said and dared not to do that, but they also said a bunch of crap. So as soon as I thought they were speaking crap, I didn't listen to anything they had to say.
Mm-hmm.
I made a mistake there.
So DARE was in 5th grade.
I think
It was really early.
What about middle school? What did you learn in middle school?
No,
I don't remember learning anything.
maybe in
Maybe
health
we had a
class,
speaker
health
come in
class
once or
something
twice,
too, yeah.
give a presentation about something.
So by the time you were introduced to drugs, you probably didn't even remember.
I mean, there's definitely
learned.
people that young probably that get into that, depending on the family life and all that kind of situational stuff.
But the majority of...
But majority, I think, don't start doing. I mean, there's around here at least, there's definitely kids that party in high school. I think more of the time it's drinking, not as much, maybe smoking a little bit. But I don't believe that until usually the end of high school, maybe, or then into college aged years, in the 20s and stuff, is when I feel like.
Well, it
more.
depends. You know, we were very lucky. We were friends with all the music people, and we had parents that brought us to everything we needed to do, and like, we had a very privileged experience. You and I,
supportive network,
network, friends who also didn't do drugs or drink very much growing up, right? Too. At least I'll speak for myself on that matter.
No, that would be the same for me. I'd say.
Yeah. So.
It's very regional.
Grew up in another situation, and it wouldn't be so crazy to end up doing drugs early. I know people started smoking when they were really young.
Yeah, marijuana was easier for us to get in high school than alcohol was.
Really?
Yeah, it was easier to get than alcohol. I mean, of course, you know, we were able to sneak alcohol from the parents' booze cabinet here and there or whatever.
Yeah.
But then, you know, a couple of times later, they start locking it up and stuff. But yeah, marijuana was easier to get for us in high school. And part of that, again, is that regulation, the regulation of booze. You know, if you're in high school, in order to get booze, you either need to have a fake ID and you need to be able to walk into the place and buy the booze, or you need to have someone older buy the booze for you, which doesn't happen, which is, you know, less often going to happen than a drug dealer selling you marijuana. That was just easier for us to come by. So that was what we did, was the marijuana back then.
That's interesting. I think there's been articles and stories about people on our campus saying it's easier to get pills, prescription meds on the street than it is to get alcohol if you're underage at UND.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally understand that, because I've had lots of friends walking into the student health just for like some weird question, and they walk out of there with like medication that they didn't need. Adderall or painkillers or Xanax or surprising. The story in the Herald I read today, I think yesterday, said that 30%, or maybe I saw it somewhere else. I should double check before I say that. I read it somewhere today. 30% of all opioid prescriptions come from dentists in our country, and it's to people aged 10 to 18. Most of their painkillers are coming from the dentist, which I can say is the only time I've ever been given painkillers by.
Wisdom teeth. I feel like maybe it's just because mouth-related surgeries or things like that. It's very painful.
It's not to say that they don't need the medication. If they probably do, you know. I mean, as we've said before, painkillers we're supposed to be able to use them sensibly, but there's probably a fair number of addictions coming out of those prescriptions too. I didn't know if there was a statistic attached to that or not.
I feel like anytime a doctor prescribes any opioid, they should almost have like a follow-up prescription of like something to like help wean the body, even if it's not a heavy opioid. Just like a little, what would you say, Narcan? Is that a...
No, Narcan would be an overdose antidote.
Okay.
But you're saying like a lesser painkiller.
Do the doctors, they just hand them these prescriptions and they say, see you later?
Frank told a story. Yeah, he got
they don't they don't give warnings or anything?
Well,
I mean, I know
they probably tell you like, there's probably instructions on bottles that like, don't take more than this many.
The warning is probably insufficient. It should be a little bigger, a little more like,
whenever I pick up meds, I take the bottles out and I throw all the papers away. I never bother to read.
It's almost like in anything in the Netflix fine print. It says, you know, read this entire document. Do you accept? And everyone always just goes to the very end and accepts it.
Yeah.
No one ever reads the little words.
But I mean, if my doctor were to like tell me in the office,
I mean, they could still tell you that, but
with like maybe like, okay, you know, I'm going to see you again in 3 weeks when your prescription is out.
In the 90s, the medical community really did not understand the danger of addiction with opioids. It was lied to by a few certain companies, and it was wrong. And doctors were prescribing stuff, and they didn't know that it was bad. Today, I think most doctors should be aware that, you know, it's literally a national public health crisis, officially declared. So I think doctors are expected to understand that if they're giving opioid prescriptions, that you got to be telling your patient about the risks and stuff. However, still many stories. Frank told one the other day where he got so many painkillers, way more than he needed, and he told his doctor that, and they still just gave him that much. My grandmother a few weeks ago was in getting pills. She was begging them not to give her this many. She promised them she wouldn't take any of them, and they still made her pick up the prescription. It's like, wow. And they say, oh, well, there's take back days where she can take those back. You think, well, that's good, but why did she need to take them if she didn't want them? You know?
Yeah.
And if she needed them, she should have them because it's a
Take
medical
back?
thing.
Don't they have to dispose of them anyways?
I think that's what they do. Yeah, they take them back and they incinerate them. So
she
you're going to
has to make
prescribe them
another
to my
trip, though?
grandmother so that she can hand them back to them so they can pay to incinerate them.
Why don't they just not give it to them?
Exactly.
But at the same time, there's certain medications at the same time. Like someone with schizophrenia who needs their medication to not hallucinate. You wouldn't want that person to who needs to pick up the prescription all of a sudden be like, no, I'm good.
No, right. But that's very different because you're not going to get addicted to your schizophrenia medication and overdose and die on it. Like my grandmother would with the painkillers, maybe.
I feel like, I don't know. Is there there's obviously not a standard dose like an opioid or anything? Because it would really
there sort
depend.
of is.
It would really depend on a lot of things about you.
They probably do it like, age and body weight or whatever. Like when you go to get your wisdom teeth pulled, there's probably like a relatively standard dose based on weight and age, I would assume.
Yeah.
And experience, I guess, if you go in there for a wisdom tooth removal and you've been on, fentanyl your whole life already because of some pre-existing pain condition, then they're going to
Oh, right.
probably give you more. There's something about that, but yeah, the warnings and they should definitely be a little bit more in your face about how addictive they are. Like you mentioned, when the first research came out by these pharmaceutical companies releasing opioids, they lied. They said less than 1%, was that the number? Less than 1% of people that are prescribed these opioids become addicted, and that is blatantly not true at all.
They were citing a comment made on an article. It wasn't a peer-reviewed comment that they were citing. They knew it was wrong.
So like going back to this DARE thing, like I appreciate what DARE was trying to accomplish because these things are dangerous. These drugs are dangerous. Drugs are dangerous. And also you've mentioned, we want to make sure we establish togetherness. We appreciate what DARE was doing. We have common goals with this DARE agenda. We just want to tweak the approach a little bit. We feel that we have a better approach to the whole harm reduction thing. And
I feel like at the same time too, maybe if for people first hearing like this harm reduction message, not to get it askew with like, oh, it's okay to do some of these drugs. It's okay to experiment as long as you know the facts.
Yeah, we want to make sure we don't convey that message as well.
Yeah. And it's like, you don't, for example, the drug LSD, you don't have to tell someone, oh, you'll go to like cool magical colors and everything and life will be happiness and all that. And like, that's not how you might convey the truth to someone. You could just tell them honestly how it like affects the brain in the sense of like cause extreme hallucinations and that kind of thing, And that's kind of what Arrowhead does. But then at the same time, they almost, that's maybe what like that would say. But then in like a food review, people write how the food tastes or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
In Arrowhead, it's like how it actually, that's where you would find like I saw, this horse poster in my room ride off into the distance or something crazy.
So what's great about Arrowhead is that it's sincere information, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And because there's so many stories of this, you read enough of them, you can get an impression. Maybe it's a statistically sound sample even. Did you finish that one, Victoria?
She completed it.
Yeah, Christmas tree.
Art complete.
But
Wow.
the cool thing,
Great
I think,
colors.
the nice thing is like you hear stories that make anything sound great, but then you also get the ones that make them sound bad. So like you'll get some viewers that I don't know what to use as an example. Well, let's use alcohol. How about some users would be like, "Yep, I drink all the time. I love alcohol. It's the best thing ever. It makes me feel good." And then you have some reviews that would be like, "I tried one drink once and it tasted bad."
And both of those
Yeah.
stories are
It's
important.
helpful to have you shape your own opinion. Like, oh
Yep.
well, like
Those are both needed.
you can have a good time, but I could also throw up, so maybe I should take this not so fast, or maybe I don't even want to drink.
And it's such a mixed message we're sending the kids then. So I want to bring this back to your question, Victoria, because you asked me what I would tell my hypothetical children. What do you tell your actual children about drugs?
They've never heard about drugs.
They've never heard about drugs from you.
Well, no.
They're little yet. They probably haven't. But
Carson likes his medicine. He likes that it's cherry flavored.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that's where it starts.
Cherry
Cherry
flavor.
flavored.
No, that
They're
kind of-
hooking them early.
Yeah, dude, they're hooking. I mean, like,
Don't you remember those grape flavored Tylenols or
Yes.
aspirins?
Yes, yes.
They
I mean-
were amazing. I would, if I were to get a bottle when I was
Candy
young.
flavored Tylenol. That's weird.
oh yeah, like
They were good.
certain medicines taste. I don't think medicine should taste good. I mean, I understand the reason, to make it so kids take it.
But you don't want to, take it when mommy's not there. And
Oh
take
yeah,
all
like
of
if
them.
you think
Think it's
this
candy.
like candy cherry flavored syrup or something, it's like, oh, this stuff tastes kind of good, and like, oh, you can make strawberry milk, whole bottle of syrup, and then all of a sudden you got some lean there, and then you're just like a little kid.
Some
just
lean.
Like,
yeah.
I
Yeah,
think it should
really.
taste bad. Not enough to make you throw up by any means, but just like, that tasted weird.
Okay, so for how long
Excuse
do
me.
you think you're going to be able to say that your kids have never heard of drugs because you haven't talked to them about it?
I probably won't introduce the subject until they're middle school at least.
Hey, when is the appropriate time to introduce that?
That's what I was saying. About
Like
the
you said,
dare
if you
program,
introduce
it's
it
hard.
too early, do you pique curiosity? Do you
I
pique their
don't
curiosity
think-
too early, or is it good to tell
Fifth
them right
grade
away?
and under. There's not drugs in 5th grade and under.
They may not be using them, but kids just 3 years older than them will be.
Yeah.
They could be, just in a very short amount of time.
I already know people that said they started smoking weed in like 7th grade.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that was the
I wonder
first time
what
I did
their
it.
home life is like, to where their parents wouldn't realize what.
It was
young
not
children-
my-
I was in
myself.
7th grade first time I smoked. I mean, I'd only done it 3 times over the course of the summer, but nonetheless, I was in 7th grade first time I
I
smoked.
know someone
weed.
who had a fine home life that it was like 7th grade too, and it was a lot.
7th grade.
I think that's totally reasonable. I mean, I'm not that
And it's
surprised,
one of
but
those things
it's
where you
insane.
can't really plan it, you can't expect it. It's all depending on who they hang out with, who the environment, not even just home life, just every aspect. Because you can have someone with a perfect home life, but if all of a sudden at school their only friends are all people who want to drink all the time, they're probably going to drink
exactly.
all the time.
Yeah, and by
Well-
reasonable, that's what I meant. I mean, just non-surprising that happened. Yeah, because exactly like that. I think for a lot of people, it's drinking. If your friends start drinking one summer in high school, it's like you're going to be drinking too.
We were talking
Yeah.
about that, like, a lot of the people we hung out with in high school weren't really a drinking crowd or anything. Like, I know near the end of high school, there were occasions, but it wasn't, like, for example, even in college, in the beginning, it's like that age, at least 20 or so, it's like, drink all the time, like, every weekend, party. But it's like, those two environments, it's kind of weird how it affects you, and how it just really, even those kind of things can change.
Yeah, there's a lot of environmental impact.
And a lot of times it's very you can't foresee it or plan it. I mean, you can kind of plan, like if you start hanging out with like certain people that they have certain behaviors, you're probably going to end up doing them. But at the same time, you can't really plan what kind of environments you'll end up in. People of all types need correct, useful information.
Yeah, I wonder what would have swayed me. I think I didn't have a whole lot of accurate knowledge, and I wonder, having accurate knowledge, would I have smoked it in 7th grade? Maybe I would have. I don't know. Maybe I was bound to do it anyways, just because of who I am. But
I feel
I
like
wonder.
it's a natural phenomena. I think because from a young age, you said even drugs like our food. When you're a little kid getting cake for your birthday, all this stuff releases the dopamine. Your
Mhm.
body's just always addicted to the dopamine.
Yep.
Natural sources that are healthy, obviously, but then
Video games.
and all of a sudden you start exploring more legal options. Maybe that's what I say. You wait till you're 18, and you smoke a cigarette or something. You get nicotine for the first time, and you're just like, wow, that was weird, but it made my brain feel like fuzzy almost. Like dopamine probably releases with that too, and it's like, then all of a sudden alcohol's involved, and then it makes your brain want to explore more of these things that you're not supposed to have, but then you get to have. But what about these other things I'm never supposed to have? Why can't I have those?
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden your brain just gets those and more dopamine, and then it's just, runs rampant.
Well, that sounds like the what somebody would call the gateway idea of marijuana. Like, to a lot of people who are misunderstood about how drugs are often gateways or not often gateways to other drugs, they would hear what you just said and think, yes, that's how it happens.
Well-
This ladder, this
Well,
perfectly
yeah,
straight
I-
ladder with.
I would have to say I didn't mean for it to be a
Right.
linear path.
I didn't think so.
It's more so a general like pattern, not in a specific order, but just a pattern that everything has to do with how the brain reacts to like these chemicals and like the dopamine and all that kind of stuff. It could be anything though. Like I said,
Yeah.
it could be cake, it could be carrots, it could be these grapes right now that I'm eating.
And because of our weird classifications about what drugs are and how we don't know how to subclassify them appropriately and talk about them or distinguish them from other things we consider food or illegal, like beer, we make these problems, and we don't believe them. Then we don't understand. We don't know what information to trust. We think it's all. We just don't know. Most
Confusing.
people find out that most of that stuff for themselves, and most people aren't in until high school or college when they get their first real good information about all this. And by then, for many people, it's too late to learn anything. You're either set in your ways, or you're overdosed and dead, or something else maybe. But it seems like, why would we wait that late for the real information?
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah,
sure.
how do you? I mean, it's not like I have the answer necessarily to talk to a high schooler or a middle schooler or a 5-year-old about these things. But
Good communication.
I think we could do better.
Relaxed communication.
Yeah, relaxed.
Yeah. Like if
Not-
you tell your kids these are cigarettes, and if I ever catch you with them,
You're dead.
you're dead. Well, then they're gonna hide it from me, and I'm never gonna know about
Yes,
it. They're gonna
yes.
hide everything.
Yes.
Rather, if you say this
Almost
is
like that parent
yeah.
that says, like, if you're gonna go to a party and you need a ride home, just call me.
Mhm.
You know, you won't get
Yes.
in trouble this one time. You'll maybe get a lecture the next day, but I'd rather have you call me than get behind the wheel.
Yeah, it sounds like a really reasonable approach. Very harm reduction oriented
Yeah.
approach.
It's kind of
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I know you're not supposed to do this, but if you do, here's a safety net.
Yeah, like convey that there's
I don't want you getting worse, or I don't want you messing up worse than you already do.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
like, I'm here, safety net.
yeah, like explain that there are dangers in these behaviors, but also you come at it understanding that
Peer pressure.
peer pressure, yeah, a lot of
That
people end up
environmental
peer
aspects.
pressuring and getting into these things. And if you do, son or daughter, end up in this situation or make this decision or whatever, turn to me and, let me help you. And I'm not going to sweep you under the rug in a dismissive, angry manner. I might be worried or whatever, and, I want to convey the dangers and help you somehow.
Maybe stern, but it's not going to be angry.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, I don't know, some things definitely you shouldn't, you can't just be like, these are bath salts, they might be bad.
Yeah.
But like, you can't, obviously some people do them for some positive reason, I guess. That's a pretty extreme end of the
Bath salts?
spectrum.
I think
Bath
what-
salts.
Positive reasons? Is
Those
there-
are like, I don't know.
Well, they do it to feel good. That's the pro. That's the
There's-
reason they do it.
Yeah.
I think one big thing is when what happens is people make blanket statements about drugs
Mm-hmm.
and say, don't do any drugs, drugs are all bad. And that's a little bit unrealistic because here we have bath salts versus marijuana versus alcohol. And, I think it's very logical and reasonable to say, don't ever do bath salts because they're very, very dangerous, very bad, and, most people end up going down a very bad road from them. Now, marijuana, on the other hand, don't do that either. Wait until you're developed and whatnot. But in reality, there are far less negative impacts on people, using marijuana. So,
For some reason, we don't admit to our kids that much.
right, yeah.
With the idea, like, if we admit them that it's even a little bit not as bad for you as it might be, that you might do it. And we don't want you to do it, so we're going to tell you that it's horrible. But
Yeah.
Well, can't you think of people, or maybe friends or whatnot, that just don't drink ever? Don't like drinking,
Mhm.
hate drinking. You tell them how fun it might be every time, all the time. Don't drink. And it's like, they're presented with all the information. They don't drink. It's like people still make their own decisions. It's not like if all of a sudden you're just like, hey, heroin, for example, I guess, isn't all that bad for you. Like, there are some aspects of it that are good for you or whatever. It's not all of a sudden going to make someone go like, oh, let me
I
want
wanna
to
do it, yeah.
I'll shoot up now. But it's just going to be like, oh, well, at least I know what it's about,
True, yeah.
I guess.
Yeah, so you acknowledge the fact that people do substances to feel good, and there are negative side effects. Typically, you feel good from a drug, you come down on the other side feeling bad. Yeah, it's weird. I remember when I was in treatment in this 12-step program, there was this saying, this mantra almost. There was always like, because they were faced with people saying, marijuana's not so bad. Can't I just do marijuana? And what the comeback was they would always say, a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug. And the problem, whenever I heard them say that, these group facilitators would say that, I would think to myself, that's simply not true. Each drug is unique, and each drug has unique impacts on the body.
Context.
Different addictive profiles and stuff. And so when they would tell me a drug is a drug is a drug is a drug, it didn't make any sense to me.
I mean, that's like going to Buffalo Wild Wings and getting all their sauces in a row and just going, a sauce is a sauce is a sauce is a sauce.
Yep.
I mean, honey barbecue versus blazing sauce. That is going to hurt you a lot.
Yeah.
Sorry.
On some level, it's true. They are all sauce. But also, what is also true is that each sauce is different.
Yeah.
So we have to acknowledge
maybe
both of those
we should lay
truths.
these sauces in front of the kids one day and give them their range. Like,
Yeah.
They've definitely seen you drinking wine at the apartment.
Yeah, they've seen us.
Have they ever, asked for some or tried to drink some? And you tell them, like, oh, you can't have that. You explain why?
No, they tried it. They didn't like it. They tried a swig of beer and they didn't like it.
I remember when I was very young like that, my dad was like, hey, son. I was like, yeah. And he's like, you want some of this beer? Or like, you want to sip? Because I think I was even curious because all the other adults are drinking it. So I was like, I want to try some. And he gave it to me, and I remember sipping it and just instantly going like, because it's just so bitter and gross. I was like, why would anyone ever drink this? My mom, I was driving with her the other day, and she actually was like, there was a time, I think I was in elementary school, or sometime middle school maybe. It was like, I was pretty young. And my mom was like, you turned to me in the kitchen and were like, I'm not going to drink, Mom. I don't know why anyone would ever drink. I promise I'll never drink. And I said that to my mom. I was like serious, dead serious.
Yeah.
What happened, Maxwell?
Oh, I don't know. I fell off the path.
Jeez, that's really funny. Did she ever rub that in, like you broke that promise?
No,
some
she
point?
brought it up one time, and she just, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I'm pretty sure we were sharing a small amount of Woodford Reserve. Is that bourbon or whiskey? It's pretty good stuff. But like, I took a sip and she's like, do you remember there was this one time when you said this? And we both shared a laugh over it.
Wow. While you're drinking together. That's funny.
Our household is very relaxed when it comes to explaining things, no-nos, and what's good, so... Like
Do they ever ask why, like, I don't know. What would you do if they came to you tomorrow and said, what is smoking cigarettes and why did somebody say it's bad?
Pictures. I would use pictures. I remember visuals were a big thing with me. Like, I remember seeing, like the meth head that lived down the road in my hometown, and I thought, I don't ever want to look like that. So I just, it wasn't a matter of like word of mouth, but it did. It just looking at it.
I feel like that's one thing you can really see about.
They'll watch YouTube videos of like, this is, what your body looks like. Like right now, they go through their books where they learn about how their body works. And he knows what color his lungs are supposed to be and what color his heart's supposed to be in his blood. Just show him a picture of like what smoking does to your lungs and be good enough. From an early age, black lungs, cigarettes.
I feel like the anti-smoking campaigns are pretty successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if they put that much effort into like touching
all
base
drugs.
on like
all drugs in general, specifically you do little commercials like that are like, the smoking ones like that, it does show the worst of it.
Yeah, do you remember sex ed, like seeing some of like the horrible video or the horrible pictures of like certain diseases?
That doesn't make people start or stop necessarily doing that activity.
But it makes you
think about being safe while you're doing it. Possibly. Otherwise, I mean, there's always going to be people that just throw care to the wind and, do really self-destructive behaviors all the time for any subject, whether it be drugs or sex or adrenaline junkies falling off a mountain or something.
And there will always be those people forever, at least some of them. So we can do what we can to keep all those people safe, including everyone else. But
isn't it funny how, like, as a person, you're not allowed to do certain substances that alter your brain and give you an experience. Yet you can go to like a mountain and put skis on your feet and just like fly down it at high rates of speed, like falling all over the place.
Yeah, with potential for injury.
Potential for death and injury. You could hurt other people even if you're not doing it right. And it's like, I don't know. I understand. There's obviously there's a big difference.
But there also is a similarity.
Dude, we absolutely could walk down to the corner store and buy enough alcohol to kill us all tonight.
Mm-hmm.
And
let's go,
guys. Easily. I mean, you drink.
We don't want that.
We can walk right now.
Drink,
Kill us.
you know.
Yeah.
We could easily drink enough that could kill us all tonight,
Mm-hmm.
and that's totally legal, totally fine. That's weird messaging.
But we're not going to do that.
Right, we're not going to do that.
We know about it, and
there may be somebody who's going to do that no matter how much treatment is available to them. And some people say, well, treatment's not going to work. Well, it may not work for everybody. There's always going to be somebody who can't do it for one reason or another. But I feel like the more effort we put into harm reduction, the more people will actually not slip through the cracks.
Yeah, so at the beginning of the episode, you asked if we had any stories like related to the season, to the new year. And I don't really have any stories, but to sort of build upon, last week's story I shared about using meth on Christmas Eve all through Christmas Day, and on that day I remember thinking, I wish that I wasn't doing this, but for some reason I am. I wish that I could tell somebody, but who can I tell? And that was related to the stigma. I couldn't tell anyone. There was nowhere I could turn, except for the only people I could turn to were people that were also doing the same thing I was doing. So in the spirit of this New Year special that we're conducting here.
New Year special.
Let this episode serve as a platform to create this New Year's resolution of bringing people together and offering people the inspiration and the ability to turn somewhere. Any viewers listening, my goal for you, what I'm hoping to convey to you today is to open your minds and your hearts to the people that have these issues and, make it safe for them to come to you so that we can help bring that number of, 4 overdose deaths this year down to 0. Because, part of that is stigma, having nowhere to turn, having nobody that is willing to listen. So that is a New Year's resolution challenge that I hold for the town, for the city, for the country. Anybody listening, for the viewers, and to all their loved ones. Let them have these open door, be an open door for them to come to with issues in that regard.
That's awesome, dude. Who's to say if 4 New Year's ago, when my friends and I decided to strip naked and sprint around our apartment building in G-Funk,
You did that?
had we had better information about the dangers of scraping your knee on the porch by the sliding door, maybe we wouldn't have done it. Maybe we would have, and that'd be our fault.
Yeah.
But you'd think if somebody did scrape their knee so bad, my friend did, but it wasn't so bad. Had we needed to call an ambulance, you'd think we would not be afraid to call one, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so whether it's actually an emergency in a medical immediate sense or in an emotional sense, you need to talk to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, be that person. I just saw the very day after I was editing up last week's episode, and I almost took out that story where I mentioned the LSD story, right? I just got a 1 year ago on Facebook thing, something I posted saying, don't embolden the taboo. People are going to die. So don't do it. Just don't. Don't make the stigma worse by not talking about something. I know people who their kids died last year from a drug overdose, and they're so embarrassed about it. They're so afraid to admit it that on their Christmas card to everyone they sent out, it says they died of a heart attack or a stroke or something normal, not an addiction.
There you go. That's exactly
They're afraid.
Yeah.
And now you realize the parents, there's the same taboo that had their kid trapped so he couldn't get any help. Now has the parents trapped in the same weird cycle. And so just don't do it. And it's hard not to do it because everybody's telling you that you shouldn't admit to any of this stuff, but it's ridiculous. More people would come forward if they knew it was okay. And that's
what do you say to them,
what's
though?
going
What
to take.
does somebody who knows nothing about drugs say to somebody who admits that they're on them?
Last year at the student...
A lot of these people don't, some of them don't want to hear, like, oh, you need to go get help. They just start telling you. I have a friend who admitted that she was doing, but I'm sure she didn't want to hear, oh, go get help.
I'd say a better approach than that, go get help, is just to inquire more why they're doing it. And, like, for example, you know...
Yeah, like, what kind of questions are you supposed to ask them?
Yeah, that's a good point. You're in a position, like, what do I do?
Yeah, like, if I had a friend who came up to me and was like, hey, man, last night and the last few nights I've been with some friends, we've been shooting up heroin or something, or using needles and stuff like that.
Do you go to their folks, then? Like,
no, I think I would just start asking them, like, I wouldn't just be super accusatory, just like, why are you doing this? Oh, you're ruining your life, man, stop. I'd just be like, how did it make you feel? How did it lead to, you know, like, why do you do it? Why do you want to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they talk about it, you know, in some cases, if someone has just a normal conversation with someone that doesn't use, for example, like if I talk to someone that doesn't smoke weed ever, and they just started asking me why I did it, and if maybe that's the first time they have a conversation, even if it's out loud with someone, of why am I doing this? You never know when it could just like help someone just as much as just a small conversation. And that's the thing. There's a stigma behind this whole topic that people don't have any conversation at all. So if you never have a conversation with someone outside of someone in the realm of whatever your activity you're doing, you know, if you are a freehand climber and you only hang out with freehand climbers and everyone's like, this is so cool, but the second you talk to someone afraid of heights and they're just like, what are you doing, you guys? You could kill yourselves and all this stuff, I guess. This is a bad metaphor, actually. Man, that derailed quite quickly.
Well, one
imagine
approach...
all the people, though, that don't want to hear about it. Some people would just be like, you know what, I don't want to know that you're on drugs. Like, I don't want to, like, that's another problem for me to deal with. Am I supposed to help you? What do you want me to do?
Some people will, what if they want help, you know? Say you had a friend talk to you about something. What if your friend was trying to ask for help and you would want to be there for them, right? If that's what they were asking for. You'd want to know how to help them and be able to help them and have the courage to do so. I think a lot of people who actually are in need of help and who are ready to ask for it they don't know who to ask.
Or imagine the task.
Well, imagine
standing by somebody who's going through and having to.
Let's say it's a acquaintance of yours that you don't necessarily want to like commit your whole life. Well, obviously you want to help them, but you can't just like drop your whole life to help them. If there was more widespread knowledge of places you can go, or more knowledge and like, you know, I don't know. I feel like just in the society in general, the term going to a therapist or something like that.
That's stigmatized, yeah.
It's a stigmatized thing of, what's wrong with you? Versus it's a very healthy thing to do. And like if this more people are knowledgeable of all this stuff and this harm reduction spirit is more embraced, people be less like afraid to say, I go to a therapist.
Yeah, it's embracing the entire harm reduction model. Like let me say it's the little things, you know, and what I mean by that is you know, if I overhear or if I see a Facebook post of people basically saying drug addicts this and that, drug addicts this, drug addicts that, bad things, you know, versus just leaving the door open, you know, maybe you don't have to invest your entire life into this acquaintance that is looking for help or that doesn't want help. You know, you just can say, you just express sympathy for the situation and say, you know, I'm here. You ever want to talk? You know, that's okay. And you'll find somebody who wants to talk. This, you know, just kind of expressing, if we could all express that versus all expressing this blanket. No.
We pretend like nothing bad ever happens to us.
I think the best thing to do would be able to have a source anywhere in any town where you could say, I have a buddy, or there's a person I know at this center. Usually it's a therapist or something, or whatever, counselor or anything. And just like I'd say a counselor would probably be the best in that case. You were talking about how if you want to, that's kind of a big challenge. That is a big challenge to help someone that's like in severe addiction.
Yeah, it's weird. On that interview with my dad, the Suboxone provider, Dr. Kurt Datz in Bismarck, he mentioned that he couldn't even find. He was he was having difficulty overcoming the hurdle of stigma, in the sense that he couldn't find a place to rent because people were denying him because he was a Suboxone provider. So there's even that stigma within
I think
medical community.
What is Suboxone again?
That's the medication for people that have opioid addiction. It fills their receptors so that they don't have withdrawals, so they can go back into normal life. They're still technically physically addicted to having their opioid receptors filled, but they can go develop normal relationships and work patterns and school habits and life habits and stuff, and deal with the physical part later.
So it almost just takes all the pain and all the suffering of a withdrawal that forces usually people back into the addiction.
Yep, basically.
It just puts a block on that and lets you kind of rebuild your healthy connections.
Yep.
And then you can kind of wean off of that in the future is the hope.
Yep. And weaning off is much easier because
less painful.
It's less painful, and also because, like, take me for example. I'm 7 years in to Suboxone treatment. It's going to be so much easier to decrease my dose because I have normal habits. I'm not going to relapse because I have friends, I have family now, I have all these projects that I care about. I have like great opportunities set up in my life because I had this medication-assisted therapy.
That's a great reason to remind everyone that on January 9th, there's going to be an event.
Oh, yes.
At the Empire, downtown G-Funk, about medication-assisted therapy. And Cal's going to be there speaking at it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
And we are confirming this on the radio right now.
Woot woot. Yeah, I'm pumped. And it's funny. I was going to be on vacation during this time, but you reiterated the fact that this panel that has now invited us to speak once kind of dismissed this harm reduction method. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it 2 Aprils ago or about a year and a half ago or something? We made a video that was basically really critical of the city's panel.
Because they were critical of what we were.
Yeah, I guess so. Right. They were saying things we thought the city panel shouldn't be saying, and we made a video that was pointing out the problems with that. And when you do that, they easily could have just continued to ignore us or chose to ignore us or disagree with us further or something, just lash out at us or anything. But instead, they're not only listening to us, they're inviting us to be the panel.
Yeah, and that is very inspiring. And like I feel once you reiterated that to me, like I realized I had this feeling of gratitude to them, to the panel, for like reconsidering their stance and for saying, okay, look, I understand you guys that there's some construction that needs to happen here, and you guys can be part of it because you have something valuable to input. So it's a great honor, and I'm so excited to be speaking. I'm pumped. I am so pumped to do that.
Know. I was just telling Michael Dulitz. So the panel, right? It's really the city people who are organizing this thing, and the city person that we've been talking to a lot recently is one of them is Michael Dulitz. He was just making me realize this again. I told him that when we're going to this conference in Baltimore in March for the Students for Sensible Drug Policy Conference, and I told him I'm going to see a bunch of people that I saw just last April at the MAPS conference in San Francisco, the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies conference. A lot of the SSDP people were there. And then I was still talking about that old video we made of our critical video of the city's panel and explaining how I thought we were still doing such a bad job at communicating, connecting with the city and not working together with them as well as we could. And now I'm going to see these people in March, and not only am I going to be able to tell them that they invited you, Cal, my friend, to be on the panel, the president of the Psychedelic Club is going to be on the panel when last year our video, there's a Psychedelic Club member asking a question who got yelled at for asking a question, basically. Like, I mean, wow, it's a wild difference.
Yeah, we have an opportunity to like bridge these communities here now. Like.
I'm gonna have to tell all these people that I'm eating my words from before when I was, explaining how I thought we weren't doing a good job connecting with the city people.
Here's proof you did
they
something.
And I mean, I blame Michael for all of this. Like,
Yeah,
but it
big
was
shout
all
out
of
to
them,
Michael.
actually.
Yeah,
It was the other city people too. He told me that are on board with this and they want to help us and they want to work together and stuff. So it's wild, and I can't wait. I hope you keep saying that on the panel to people. Be like, yo, remember that at one point I thought I wasn't welcome in this conversation.
Yeah, and thank you for welcoming me
Yes,
back. Now
yes.
here I am.
Yes,
Here we are.
it does make it easier to want to put more work into it.
Yeah,
Realize,
and I'll be more willing to share
changed.
everything. Yeah.
So that's a big difference from last year. I wouldn't have wished for this last year at New Year's, thinking it was even possible. But we're at the point we're at now, and that's wild. So maybe we should wish for something even bigger than we think we should for next New Year's. Or maybe we should just be grateful if we make it there in one piece.
Yeah, I like the one step at a time, and then of course let's dream big. Let's dream big into the future. Yeah, next year's a whole nother world.
Let's decrease Grand Forks overdose deaths by 400% next year.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
I like that.
sweet. Well, I'm glad I got to fit in my story about sprinting around my apartment building naked on New Year's once. I achieved that in this chat, so I'm satisfied.
That's one when you're a grandpa someday. You're gonna tell your
Yeah.
grandson, listen here, Timmy.
Yes, I need to remember that. Well, thank you everybody for listening to the Harm Reduction Report. We're gonna eat some more of these scones probably.
Yes.
Call it a night. It's late. It's late. Kind of late. I mean, it's Friday night, right?
It is Friday night, but it's getting late as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a wonderful opportunity. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Will, thanks for having me. Vic, thanks for being here. Max, shout out to Michael again, Noah and Noah's father, and everybody involved. Thank you to the viewers and the community and everybody. Thank you everybody. And your pal Cal signing off.
And to my parents who let us eat their food and
Yeah, that's
hang out here again.
Yes. Yeah, thanks for being in the home.
Reduction Report
Do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Show and Will's Basement. It's live.
All right.
Explosion at the end. Oh, and one thing I
That
want to
was
do.
flush.
Everybody quiet for a second.